Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Real Good News. We appreciate you being here with us, and we look forward to a lively discussion this evening. But before we do that, we're going to hear from John Gage. You can buy and stream John's songs on iTunes and Spotify, and you can follow John on his Facebook page. He has happy making and person deepening music that you will enjoy. So find him on the internet. John, can you begin us with a song? We always look forward to your mastery of music on this program.
Actually, Elisa, John, if it's okay with you, we're gonna plan on having you near the end and start with your Defying Gravity song.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting.
That's right.
That's good.
We'll go right ahead, and thank you all.
I live on a big blue ball. I never
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks to John for blessing us with his song, Big Blue Ball, Defying Gravity. I appreciate everyone being here this evening. I will introduce the program, but first, I want to recognize the sponsors of this event. They include the Kentucky Interfaith Power and Light, where I am the executive director. We also have a sponsor of the Christian Action Group of St. Paul United Methodist Church. So through these folks, we have gotten this group up and running, and we are hoping that people here will learn and be equipped to help us move toward zero fossil fuel use in the near future. And I am going to introduce Margaret, who is going to talk to you about our goals here at Real Good News. Margaret, you're on.
Thanks, Elisa, and welcome. Glad to see each one of you who have joined us this evening. Thank you so very much. Just a quick review of the resolution for renewable energy for Louisville. I'm a member of REAL, the Renewable Energy Alliance of Louisville. We were instrumental in our group in getting the council to pass this resolution, which calls it's a three-stage resolution. The first goal is for renewable electricity for all city operations, metro government operations, that is, by 8 years from now, 2030. The second goal is by 2035 to have all city operations, city government operations to be clean renewable energy. And that will include transportation, heating, and cooling. Also, not just electricity. The final goal of our resolution is by 2040, 18 years from now, to have the whole city, residences, businesses, all of us, totally dependent on clean, renewable energy. That's by 2040. So we have a lot of work to do. The words on the piece of paper are great, but now we got to make them real. That's our job. So that's part of why we're here tonight. That's also motivating factor for why we encourage people to give little 3-minute talks to each Metro Council meeting. Our council meets twice a month typically, and anyone can sign up as to speak. So if this, and I'm assuming that those of you who are attending with us tonight consider this a very important mission for the city to accomplish, you're invited to sign up to speak for 3 minutes to the Metro Council on why it's important to you. I think it's really good to have a wide variety of people to talk to the council, just telling their own story. Just since our last event that we had at the end of August, Nancy Cuppersmith addressed the council. Then this month, it's been Roxanne Sturdivant, who's here with us tonight, and Paul Westland, each at different meetings gave little 3-minute talks. And coming up early next month, Paul Worms, from many of you might know him from Bernheim Forest Connection, will be addressing the council. So we're very grateful for this. I would encourage anyone to do it. It's good to get to know the Metro Council from the inside that way. And Paul was a new speaker recently. Paul, would you just share a few words about what it's like to do this little 3-minute talk so that we can encourage others?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Yeah, after 2 years of helping organize these events, I guess maybe my guilt finally got to me, and I thought it's my turn to go and talk to the council. And it was, the whole process was really a lot of fun. Margaret and Sam kind of coached me through it. Basically, you call a phone number, and they're very nice at the end of the phone, and they sign you up and tell you what to go and where to go, and ask if you have any handouts, which I did, and they took care of those. It is a 3-minute talk, and so I had fun writing that up. You can get to say whatever you think is important about global warming. And I practiced a little bit, and I found out that 450 words comes in at about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. So that worked for me. Then I guess I would say the hardest part of the whole thing was making sure where I was supposed to go. I had the address, which is on Jefferson Street, but the entrance is on 6th Street. But people were very helpful, and I found my way in. When they called my name early, about 10 minutes after 6, I went up, read my statement, and I was out of there by 6:30. It was pleasant, easy, got to be part of government, and felt like I did a good thing. So I highly recommend it. Didn't hurt at all.
Good.
Thank you very much, Paul. I just would like to also acknowledge that Sam has been coordinating this. He has the dates of the council meetings handy. He can give you any further instructions and help you find a date when no one else is assigned yet or volunteered yet to speak on this topic. So we can spread out our speakers, but it's okay if we have 2 at one meeting also. That would be great. But so Sam, I think we'll have your email address posted so people can connect with you. Put that up in the chat. It's samuelavery@gmail.com. So please consider doing that. Invite anyone else you know who might be interested in doing that. And thanks a lot. Elisa?
Thanks, Margaret. We're going to go to Sam. He has done a lot of and so I'm going to turn it over to Sam, and he's going to introduce the program this evening and also the panel who will be speaking to you.
And Lisa, we just lost about 15 seconds of what you said. So if there was anything crucial, you might want to repeat it.
Go for it, Sam. Introduce the program.
That was the best part of the show, all the wonderful things you were going to say about me, but that's okay. We'll move on with it. But at any rate, as Margaret mentioned, the first goal of our 100% renewable energy resolution is for 100% renewable electricity for city operations. That's a fairly limited goal. It's about 1% of the total electricity that the city and the area consumes. But the big question is, how are we going to do this? We passed this resolution, but how are we actually going to produce the energy that we use in a renewable manner? And that's a huge problem. So what we're going to do here tonight is to speak to 2 energy managers, one of them being from Cincinnati and the other one being our own from here in Louisville. So we're going to find out what they're going to do, and we're going to find out what we're going to do, or at least what we've done so far. To begin with, from Cincinnati, Cincinnati is very important to us because, as Margaret mentioned also, or did you mention that? I think maybe that was from when we were talking before, that before we got our resolution passed, when this group was lobbying heavily to get this resolution passed by the Louisville Metro Council, we had a gentleman from Cincinnati who was instrumental in passing their resolution, and that was Forrester. I can't remember his first name, but he was instrumental in speaking to our Metro Council Committee on Parks and Sustainability. And I think he was one who really helped get this through. So we're very interested in that. We feel a debt to Cincinnati, but also they're working on it. They're actually got some things going on where they're moving in the right direction. So that's why we've invited Robert McCracken, who's the energy manager of Cincinnati, and he will put him on first. And then we'll speak to our own Zachary Tyler, who's the energy manager here. Robert, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sam, and thank you everybody for inviting me here this evening. I'm gonna see if I can put up some slides here, if I can do that. And if I remember the best way to do this. All right, I think we're there. Hopefully everybody can see that. So I'm going to talk tonight a little bit about Cincinnati's renewable energy journey. We are certainly early in our journey, have a long way to go still, but we've started it. And, you know, certainly our journey is going to be different than your journey as you go through this. We have different rules and regulations in each state that are really going to impact how you approach this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea about the path that we have taken. And it may spark some creative ideas on your end about a path that you could take. So any discussion that we have about trying to advance my slides, how'd I do that? Any discussion we have about advancing slides, right? Okay, let's try. Maybe I shared the wrong thing. All right, I think we're in the right spot. Why do you not want to advance? Oh, that's why. All right, here we go. There, oh, there, okay. All right, so any discussion that we have about our renewable energy path really begins with our Green Cincinnati plan. So the Green Cincinnati plan is our sustainability plan. We issued our first one back in 2008, and we have just kind of updated it every 5 years since. It very much is a community plan. We have a lot of community involvement. We're in the midst of updating it right now. We've had about 30 community meetings, probably have, I don't know, 3,000 recommendations that have come out of those meetings. So we're trying to sort through all of that and try to make sense of it to help develop this next plan. So while it's a community document, it's also, you know, it's all about laying out an ambitious and all-encompassing goals for the city. And, you know, it's also a plan of action. So the things that are outlined in the Green Cincinnati plan are things that we as a city really want to advance and move forward. So of the 80 or so recommendations, I believe, that were in the 2018 plan, we've accomplished or are on the way to accomplishing about 85% of those. So we're laying out goals, laying out things we want to achieve and working toward those. We still have a lot of work to do. Some of the ones we haven't accomplished are big ones. And so we'll start with some of those. You know, one of the big goals that was in the Green Cincinnati Plan 2018 was to reduce emissions by 34%, I think it is underneath on this slide, compared to 2006 levels by 2023, and then by 84% by 2050. So this was in a 2018 plan. Things have changed a bit as we've looked forward to 2023. But how do we do in that so far? So we're on track right now to meet our goal of an 84%, our current goal, I should say, of an 84% carbon reduction by 2035, right? Or sorry, 2050. So we're right now at 36.3% compared to our 2006 emissions. So, you know, we've met our goal for 2023 of that reduction. And, you know, we've charted out a path that kind of gets us toward where we want to go. Of course, like most things, the first part is the easy part, right? And now it becomes complicated as we go forward, and it's going to take new and creative solutions to continue to get the balance of what we want to accomplish. So I said this was our 2018 goal. Our 2020 or 2023 goal, these dates are killing me tonight. The 2023 goal is now for us to make sure that we're at 100% carbon reduction by 2050. Science has told us 84% good enough, so we're now going to have to figure things and make sure we're at 100% carbon reduction or carbon neutrality by 2050. So there are a couple other goals that came out of the Green Cincinnati plan that are really pertinent to this discussion here. One was 100% renewable energy for city government by 2035. So that is not only electricity, but it'll also involve us shifting away from natural gas for heating and cooling. And the big ones that'll just kill us on that will be our water treatment and wastewater treatment. And then the other one was to triple renewable energy generation for residents and businesses. So recognizing that, well, we've done some work to try to increase the amount of renewable energy in the city, we still have a lot of work to do. How can we kind of implement programs and help those residents and businesses adopt renewable energy? All right, so we have had some successes over the last several years. We have installed over 4 megawatts of solar on city facilities. This is everything from bathrooms in some of our parks to the top of the convention center to recreation facilities. We're in the process now of adding solar on another 9 facilities. A lot of those are fire stations, a couple rec centers, and then some garages. So really trying to continue to look at ways that we can put solar on site within the city. We also opened several years ago the country's first net zero police station. That is a great asset here in the city. The police love to work in it. It's everybody wants to work in District 3. It's got solar panels all over it. It's LEED certified, and it's really an incredible building. We also, from a city facility side, we use 100% green energy, green electricity. A lot of that is from RECs, right? We're purchasing renewable energy credits, but at least for city facilities, we're doing that. I got to convince my water treatment and sewer treatment plants to spend extra money on that. But right now, from a facility standpoint, we're all at 100% green electricity. We're also the first large city to offer 100% green energy for its aggregation program. So in Ohio, we are non-regulated. This will kind of be important a little bit later on. In Ohio, we are non-regulated, so all our residents, actually anybody in the state, can choose their energy supplier. And so what we're allowed to do as a city is group together all our residents. We have 83,000 residents, or I should say accounts, that are part of this program, and we take that out to bid and we try to get a good rate for them. And so we've been able to make sure that through the purchase of RECs as well, that we're able to offer 100% green energy for everybody who participates in our aggregation program. And lastly, we do have a Solarized program. I know you all have something similar down in Louisville. You're familiar with that, but that's one of the things we're doing to try to kind of increase the amount of solar in residential buildings. We've had a number of successes as we work toward these goals, but there's still more to do, and that's what brings us to this guy. So this may be an urban legend, I do not know, but it's a story that my former director, Michael Forrester, told. And he said that our former mayor about 5 or 6 years ago was out at a concert, saw Paul Simon, and because he's a mayor, he got to meet him afterwards. And Paul said, "Mr. Mayor, what are you guys doing to address the climate issues in facing your community?" And the mayor responded. Told him a little bit about what the city was doing, and Paul Simon said, "That's not enough. You have to do more." So that kind of got the mayor thinking. As he was driving home from the concert venue, he passes our largest water treatment plant, and he thought, "I wonder if we can make that solar." And so he brought that idea to Michael Forrester, who was the energy manager at the time, and asked him, "Is this something we can do? How could we take care of this? How can we make this real?" So out of those discussions came a couple of different goals. One was, how can we use the city's annual electricity load to install renewable energy at no additional cost to the taxpayer? That's really important to us as a city. We want to make sure that we're, taking care, being good fiscal stewards of taxpayer money. And we also want to make sure that we're not putting the city in a spot where it could be on the hook for something if for some reason regulations change or something like that. So that was really important to us. Second thing, in line with the whole fiscal responsibility is, can we make a long-term budget hedge to protect us from energy price fluctuations? So, we've kind of seen that, especially on the natural gas side recently, right? Natural gas prices have gone up, $2 or $3 over the past year. Well, how could we, from an electricity side, lock in a rate that's going to be there so that the city is not subject to those different fluctuations in the market? And lastly, was there a way that we could provide local solar energy to residents, and to the city itself? So, our initial idea was for about 25 megawatts, and that's kind of what is outlined in the Green Cincinnati plan. But it became something much bigger. So this is an aerial shot of the current solar project that is underway here. Sorry, I couldn't get a better one. This is what we have. But this covers about 900 acres, about 40 miles east of town here in Highland County. That's 100 megawatts. That's about, so let me back up. That 900 acres is about the size of 600 and I always get this wrong, 680 football fields, just to give you an idea of the size. So it covers a lot of ground. There's over 310,000 solar panels that will be out there. So we had hoped to have everything open by now, but between COVID and some of the different solar supply chain issues and tariffs and things that were going on, it's a little bit slowed down. We're about 24 megawatts that are open right now, and expect another 11 to be open here in the next couple months, and then hopefully that remaining 65 will be here, will be up and running soon. So one of the things we knew when we started this was that 35 megawatts wasn't going to cut it from a price standpoint. We had to figure out a way to make this solar field bigger, because when we got to a larger scale, we were able to get the cost that we would pay per kilowatt hour lower. And that was important to us, right? We wanted to get the best rate that we could for the city. And so that's where that aggregation program that we talked about earlier came in. So how could we bring the aggregation program in and all those residents in order to get us up to a good scale of around 100 megawatts? So we ended up with 35 megawatts of solar for the city and its facilities, and 65 megawatts for our aggregation program. So you can see these things that this is going to help us address, everything from reducing our carbon footprint to helping to save money, to improving air quality, to creating jobs. And interestingly enough, Michael, when he put all these contracts together, figured out a way for it to be a revenue stream for the city. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit as well. So 35 megawatts for the city. We used a power purchase agreement. That's something we're able to do in Ohio. A lot of other states, I don't think you all are allowed to do that in Kentucky. But this is what we did. We basically contracted for this power from these 35 megawatts at a set rate over the course of X number of years. We were able to work with the supplier that we use as a city. So they are going to make sure that they get that energy from the field, from the solar array, incorporate it into what we're purchasing, and then they'll fill in the gaps. All right. So it worked for them. They had to buy energy from somebody anyway, so they bought it from the PPA or from that solar field, and then they're just kind of getting incorporated into the grid. So and then, we are also getting the RECs from that 35 megawatts. So, any of that clean energy that's produced, we're getting those credits, and we are able to retire them and count that toward the city's carbon reduction. So that is fairly, we'll say, straightforward, even though those contracts can be a couple hundred pages long. But it really allowed us to say, let's take that 35, let's lock in a rate, and let's make sure that we're getting that for city facilities. How do we decide on 35 megawatts? It really came down to what our energy usage was. You can see here this really ugly color green line shows what the solar was producing in May, or would produce in May if all 35 megawatts were open. And you can kind of also see what our energy usage is throughout the course of the day. And we're a little higher in the evenings and overnight, because that's when our waterworks facilities tend to do most of their pumping, because the charges are lower. And so that because it's a PPA, we don't have to use that electricity immediately. We're able to spread that out. So we wanted to make sure that it did not, we didn't exceed our usage, because the city, what were we going to do with the extra power? Like we need to make sure it was right at our usage. So the power produced from this 35 megawatts, it's going to cover about 25% of city usage throughout the year. So like I said, we're early in our journey. We have a long way to go. We've figured out a quarter of it, but we have more work to do on that front. Other thing just to point out, like I said, this was a good from a budget perspective as well. This is a rather old graph, but at least gives you the idea. You look at the what happens throughout the course of the day. So we get toward the evening hours or later in the day, demand kind of increases, the price of electricity can increase. So rather than kind of going with those demand charges and things like that, we're able to lock that price in at a set price. And not have to worry about any of that. So that was one of the other benefits, was that consistency in the pricing that we could lock in with that power purchase agreement. All right, so this is where things get crazy. This is the 60 megawatt we had for our 65 megawatts we had for the city aggregation program. It is like a layer upon layer upon layer of contracts. It's like peeling an onion, trying to figure out how all of this fits together. So basically what we did is through our aggregation program, we put out an RFP and said, we would like a provider who can serve the city's aggregation program we'll give the contract for 10 years. But what you have to do is you have to buy power from the 65 megawatt solar array. And so we were able to find a provider that would do that for us. They are purchasing directly from the solar array, the folks who own it, kind of through a PPA as well. And then they're incorporating that into the power that the grid mix that they're sending to the city. So to city residents. So like I said, it's a little complicated. The city did not want to sign the PPA. We didn't want to be on the hook for that. The company we use, they're an energy supplier. So even if something changed regulatory or for one reason or another, they still could use that energy with another customer. So we wanted to just make sure that we weren't on the hook for anything. The other thing we'll talk about here is going back to that idea of revenue for the city. There's a couple things that we did. One is, we do get the RECs for this as well. So if we did want to sell them and then buy cheaper wind RECs from out west, we could do that and make money off our solar RECs here and buy cheap wind RECs. We don't plan to do that, but we do get the RECs. The other thing that happens is that we also told the provider of our aggregation program, we want you, and I'm going to be getting ahead of myself here. Yeah, we'll go here. Through the benefits. One of the things that we talked to the supplier about is we said, we like you to sell this capacity, the energy producing capacity that the solar array has through PJM, which is our regional grid operator. And so every year PJM holds auctions to figure out who they're going to buy electricity from. And so we put this solar array on for the 22-23 year we were picked up. That money that the city will get from that is about $600,000 for the next year. So the 23-24 year prices came down a little bit, but we're still going to get around $400,000 for this solar array. Even though it's not completely built and operational, we're going to get that money because it's not our fault it's not built. It's up to the contractors that are supposed to be doing it. So that's a nice thing to have. It can fluctuate from year to year as to whether our system gets picked up. But Michael was very shrewd when he said, we want to keep the capacity. We don't want to give that away. We want to be able to have the option to kind of generate some revenue from that. Other things that happened from this project, it was projected early on to save about $2 million annually in energy costs. For the city, right now, even with the 21 megawatts that we have open right now, This savings right now, because electricity prices are so crazy, we're at about $4 million. As if I had gone out and said, I'm going to buy a 12-month strip of electricity on the market, that would cost me about $4 million more than what I'm paying right now. So there are savings from the city's perspective in this. So it was a good business investment. Like, we wouldn't have done this if it wasn't a good business investment for the city. And then lastly, that bottom point, our residents are saving money as well. So in Ohio, all the investor-owned utilities, they have a standard service rate. So if you were to purchase directly from our utility, from Duke Energy, they would charge you about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, our residents, through our aggregation program, even though we're buying RECs from Texas right now because the solar field's not up, they're paying 5.03 cents. So they're paying 1.5 cents cheaper per kilowatt hour than they would for Duke. So this is a win. Going green here has been a win-win both for the city and for its residents. All right, so a couple takeaways. I know I spoke a lot, tried to cover a lot. These are things that I think about if I were in your shoes, and even as I'm thinking now about different things going forward that we can do in Cincinnati to continue to advance our goals. The first one is act like a business in a way, right? I think there's so many times that that governments think about it from a government perspective, and you have to think out of the box a little bit, the way a business would, to try to figure out how to solve some of these problems. The second one is be creative. When Michael came up with this idea of how to kind of put all these different pieces together, it wasn't something that had been done before. He had gone to some conferences, and we, talked with different solar developers and said, well, could you do this? Could you do this? Could you do this? They're all like, I think you could do that, but no one had actually done it. And so, he was being creative. He got it all pieced together, got us to work. And again, it was a benefit for the city and its residents. And then finally, continually advocate for change. PPAs may not be available right now in Kentucky. Is there a way to continue to advocate with the legislature to make PPAs a feasible structure? Is there a way to work with LG and EKU and to say, I think they have a way to purchase green energy from them too. Do you take the city facilities and say, we're bringing this much to you, what sort of rate can you give us, right? I think there's always different ways to look at it. Every solution is going to be different compared, based on the situation in which you're in and, the different parameters that you're operating under. But, at the end of the day, I think the only way that any of us are going to solve any of these problems related to climate change, whether it's switching to renewable energy or, reducing emissions from transportation and becoming more green on that side, is to really think creatively, think out of the box, and try to come up with new solutions that are kind of push the envelope of what other people have done before. So with that, I'll leave you a picture of our solar field as it stands now. You can see the racking systems in the back corner there for the remaining 11 megawatts. Thank goodness, that's a lot bigger than kilowatts. The remaining 11 megawatts that will be out there. So we're looking forward to getting that up and running, and looking forward to continuing to figure out ways that the city of Cincinnati can become greener and achieve its goals, and also learning from other cities like Louisville to figure out what you all are doing and ways that we can adapt what you do and incorporate it into the things that we're doing here in Cincinnati. So thank you all very much for your time. Appreciate you having me here tonight.
Thank you, Rob. We appreciate you being here, and I think you've given us some pretty good advice here. And our situation is different. The main difference is that we do not regulate our utility in Louisville. Our utility is regulated in Frankfurt by the state. So that it's a different personnel, different political persuasions in each location. So it's going to be difficult. let me ask a few questions or a couple of quick ones about what you've said, and then we'll have time for maybe one or two questions from the audience. First of all, Rob, you talked about a PPA, and that stands for a power purchase agreement, which I think is a very important concept for what you're doing and for what we would be doing. Even though it technically right now it's not actually allowed by our state, but we're going to do something like that. We have to do something like that because people think that, oh, this is going to be very expensive. You know, Louisville's going to have to spend millions and millions of dollars building a solar field like you did. Tell us, please, what is the difference between building your own solar field and using a power purchase agreement, a PPA?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to be honest, to put it simply, we paid zero money. We had zero money involved in the building of this solar field. So the city was completely protected. If it went south and it didn't get built, we wouldn't have been out anything. So with the power purchase agreement, we simply signed a contract to buy the power from that solar field or from the developer who was building it, but we don't have any money in the building of it at all. So that's what makes it so appealing, especially from a city's perspective. I mean, even Amazon and Google and other large companies, I mean, they are all doing PPAs where they are purchasing power from a developer that built the wind farm or the solar field. So they're not building it themselves. They're letting someone else do that. Someone who is a solar expert or a wind expert. They're just saying, we'll buy the power, and they're committing to buy the power for a long enough period of time that it makes it economical for the developer to actually build the project.
Right. Okay. And actually, I should mention that LG&E actually is engaging in some power purchase agreements with major corporations, universities, and so forth and so on.
Right.
So we can do something like that here. We just have to figure out how to do that.
Right.
And the other thing is, well, I think what is we talked about RECs, which is an REC. It's a renewable energy credit. But how does that work, and how are you using that?
Right. So, renewable energy credits basically capture the environmental attributes or the clean energy attributes of that energy. And so, there's a market for RECs out there. You can sell them because some companies say, well, we want to buy RECs to offset our usage. That's kind of in a way what we are doing, right? This power that's produced 40 miles east of town, those electrons aren't going to make it to Cincinnati, right? They're going to go on the grid and go where they go. But we're purchasing and maintaining those environmental attributes of it. So we are, we're allowing that green energy to be built. And, we're, making that 100 megawatts is replacing some dirty energy somewhere else on the grid. And so, we're getting those environmental attributes for it. And so that's something that, like I said, with our aggregation program, we're purchasing environmental attributes from wind farms in Texas because they were really cheap right now. And so we were able to do that to help offset the dirty energy that we're buying. We're creating demand for those, for that wind out in Texas, and we're buying those environmental attributes. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does make sense. And in fact, I have solar on my house, and I sell renewable energy credits. I sell RECs on an open market, and I make money, not from the electricity itself, but from the fact that I have produced renewable energy. I'm able to sell that right to somebody else, like Cincinnati, which may not be producing all of their energy that they're consuming. So it's a good program, and it's something that we will probably engage in at some point or another. However, I think eventually we want to do something like a large solar, utility scale solar installation, so we can be adding to the total generation in the world of renewable energy, as well as creating a market for somebody else to produce it elsewhere. So, Paul, do we have any other questions from the audience?
Not at this point.
Okay. All right. One thing before we move on to Zach, one other thing I'd like to ask you, Rob, is about this. You were able to actually make money for the city, not only saving money because solar energy is cheaper. Not only were you saving money, but because of the renewable energy credit programs, you were actually able to generate income for the city by going solar. Is that right?
That's correct. And we're not doing it through the RECs. We're keeping the RECs and retiring those so that we get the we get the credit for it, right? We want to make sure that we're saying our energy is clean. If we sold it, we'd be just back to dirty energy, right? Technically, like on the balance sheet, we would be. So the main thing for us was that capacity market where we were able to get those payments when the solar field was picked up on the capacity auction each year. So that was one of the main ways that we were able to do that. Now we could sell the RECs and buy cheaper ones somewhere else and still stay clean. But that's certainly not something we want to do. We want the local clean energy to be here and say we purchased from a local clean energy producing facility. So
and I think you mentioned that there's actually more than one power purchase agreement, in that the solar field is not owned by your primary energy provider. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So there's a developer who owns the whole solar field. We have a contract with that developer to buy the power from 35 megawatts. And we have a kind of a separate contract with our energy supplier for the city to make sure that they're incorporating that into our purchases from them. And then there is a different PPA agreement between the company, the supplier for our residential aggregation program, with that developer. So there are lots of different contracts, like I said, but there are really two different PPA ones, one with the city directly with the developer for its share, and then one with our supplier to the developer for the residential share.
Okay.
Sam, we've got an observation and a question in the chat. The observation from Julie Donna that a local Cincinnati filmmaker and city councilman made a documentary on the net zero police station that Rob mentioned earlier. Says it's worth checking out. And after Martha Flack's question, I'll just toss in another question of why do they like working there so much? But the question for Martha Flack is, if PPAs are not allowed in Kentucky, how is it that LG&E has them with other companies?
Mhm.
My understanding, Sam, you can answer this too, is from what I read, is that LG&E is basically the one signing the PPA. So if there's a solar field built somewhere in Kentucky, they're signing the PPA with the solar field, and then they are working with the with Toyota or Dow or whoever it may be to kind of get them that clean energy. So it's not that Toyota is signing the PPA. It's that Toyota is working with LG&E, KU, and then they are signing the PPA. So that was my understanding of the flow, but I may be wrong, Sam.
So yeah, that's, in other words, LG&E is not necessarily going to be building and owning the solar facilities themselves. They're signing a contract with a solar developer who's going to actually do the building and operate the solar field and sell the electricity at a given price. So there are lots of different ways we can do this. So that if LG&E is doing that already, we could get our renewable energy through LG&E possibly. That's one way to do it. I'm a little bit, I think maybe the monopoly problem is going to show up in terms of pricing, but we'll see. And maybe we should ask our own energy manager, Zachary Tyler, sorry, I'm sure that's happened before. Zach Tyler has been our energy manager here in Louisville for quite some time, and he's already whittled away at the LG&E bill for the city, and I think he's paying for his own lunch that way, as I understand. So Zachary, take it away.
Thank you, Sam. That was a really inspiring renewable energy journey to hear, and it is a good message that you have to be creative and you got to keep advocating for it. So that's a great reminder. So I do have a few slides that I'll get to in a moment, but first I'll just sort of recap where we were last time that an update was given and perhaps what's changed since then.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the last update that was given in one of these events was we had entered in a contract with the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL. We were in a phase 1 contract with them to help assess really what are our pathways to meet the first step of our renewable energy goals, the 100% renewable electricity for metro government operations. That phase 1 has been concluded, and it is what we used to develop the scope of work for our phase 2 contract. In short, the phase 1 was looking at, given our regulatory and political environment, what are our options on the supply side? The results of that are that we will continue to explore the possibilities of entering into a green tariff with LG&E. That is essentially going through the same programs referenced earlier, where they would have a PPA with their own developer, and then they would sell it to clients of their own clients. So that is kind of in reference to Martha's Flex question as well. Whereas PPAs can be pursued by the utility companies here and the energy provided to their customers, we as customers are not allowed to procure our own PPAs from a provider outside of the utility that serves our geographic region. So LG&E's version of this program is the Green Tariff Program, and they have had several successful examples, such as with Dow and Toyota. In previous years, LG&E had considered us not to be a qualifying customer for that program because our consumption was not as high as some of those other customers. However, it does appear that their criteria for that has evolved, and they are certainly willing to look into green tariffs with us. So one big element that came from phase 1 and is now part of our phase 2 contract with NREL is that they will be facilitating those conversations with LG&E to see if we can negotiate terms that would help supply that energy to our accounts and still be developed locally, which is the end result that we want to see. If that could be achieved through LG&E, that would be a great means to do it. Separately from that, the other action we're taking on the supply side is the city has issued an RFP for a study of municipalization. So essentially what we are looking for in this study is what would be the feasibility of basically creating a municipal utility just for the city government operations. It would not be a municipal utility serving Louisville Metro government, but it would be a small utility that essentially just serves our buildings. And we would, at that point, only need to really build the infrastructure to connect to the regional MISO grid and transmission to supply to our facilities. So we have issued that RFP. We have received some responses and are currently scoring those to see what company we might be working with to help study the feasibility of this pathway as an alternate solution to taking control of our own energy supply. There is a third on the supply that I'll get to a little bit later. But first I'll go to the other big conclusion of the phase 1 study with NREL is that currently what we are able to have the most direct impact and control on is our consumption. And it is a good place to start because it does produce vast amounts of cost savings that we can leverage as we try to pursue these other supply side pathways. So they had recommended that the quickest pathway to start moving towards this goal would to be improving our municipal operations in our buildings, modernize our buildings. And a big portion of what came out of the phase 2 contract is they're going to help study and basically determine short-term and long-term prioritization of our capital projects. So I think right now it would be a good time to go ahead and share my screen and talk a little bit about what we've done already on the energy efficiency and conservation. So let me see if I can get this going. Are you seeing my slides right now?
Yes.
So this is from an internal meeting we had a month ago, reviewing our progress towards our internal goals. We had recently committed to the Department of Energy's Better Buildings Challenge, where we have set an additional goal of specifically on the building consumption efficiency side to improve or reduce our building energy consumption by 30% by 2030. And this is really complementary. It wouldn't be wouldn't be replacing any other goal. It's just to make sure that our efficiency continues to grow as we pursue other supply side options. And essentially from our 2019 baseline, we have been able to see overall a 10% reduction in Louisville Metro government's energy consumption. We plan to measure this in EUI, the energy use intensity of each and every individual facility, but are still working on getting that dashboard built out. And this is at least 30% towards our overall goal. And just from the data we have so far, we've been able to see pretty substantial use avoidance across our building portfolio. I'd like to point out that as of the start of last year, we were not yet even benchmarking our facilities. So Louisville Metro really had no measure of our total energy consumption, how much we were using it, where it was being used. And so while we had big goals, we really had no way to measure our progress towards them. And that was a huge challenge because you need to be able to validate that what you're doing is actually working. So in order to actually measure our progress towards our energy efficiency and overall energy usage and know how much renewable energy we even need to supply, we started by getting all of our utility data billing converted to a digital billing process, which is now automatically benchmarked. So as we make these energy efficiency improvements in our buildings, we're able to validate the impact those have by the direct reduction that we see in our utility bills each month thereafter. So we started seeing pretty substantial reductions in February of last year, because at that point we had a large number of facilities that basically were only used during business hours, but were still operating their mechanical systems, their HVAC, and in some cases even lighting 24/7. And so right out of the gate, there was a pretty big impact from using our building automation systems to set back these systems at nights and weekends that the facilities were not in use. And essentially from there, that was a big leverage in being able to get utility costs to show to city leadership and others that, there's money to be saved here. Our total utility cost for Louisville Metro is approximately $14 million annually, and we are averaging about 11% cost avoidance across these utility costs now. That came from those building changes, but it also came from cleaning up our utility accounts, closing accounts that we were paying fees for but weren't even serving anything, and closing accounts for vacant facilities. And those have continued to grow from month to month. It's important to continue to reduce this particular cost of the city and be able to leverage those for next steps. So I just wanted to be able to show how so far, we've seen pretty substantial impacts from these facility changes, and they are continuing to grow. So since the start of last year, our total cost avoidance has reached approximately 1.2 million, which is equivalent to over 11 million kilowatt hours or 123,000 cubic feet of natural gas. And it's also equivalent to about 10,000 tons of carbon equivalent in emissions. Now, the big thing that we were able to leverage from this is we took this to council with a drafted energy innovation fund. And essentially what we were able to get passed as of earlier this year is a resolution that formalizes a mechanism where we take these savings and we move them to a capital fund that is specifically reserved to finance energy projects. We have a lot of old, outdated buildings, and they've not received sufficient investment to make sure that they're operating as they should. And we also really haven't had any type of dedicated fund we could tap into for things such as rooftop solar or studying, other good next steps that we should take. And so having been able to see some of this quick returns in these initial steps, there was a lot of support in being able to utilize these savings to move forward and accelerate our progress. So the resolution, at the way that it is structured, is we will be able to take approximately 80% of all demonstrated utility savings each year and move it into this capital fund. For this fiscal year, our funding is approximately $700,000 for energy projects. And that is where the phase 2 work with NREL has become really important, is we are identifying which particular facilities and types of projects are going to be important to prioritize. We want to prioritize projects that are going to have a really quick return and a really high impact upfront, because the effect that will have is it will accelerate the momentum of this fund, of our energy savings, and ultimately of our future investments. So we are anticipating that this first year, a lot of the initial projects will revolve around lighting. The vast majority of our buildings do not have LED lighting, and that is a really, really high impact item that we really need to prioritize upfront. Another type of project that we expect to prioritize this year and next year would be building controls. We have in total approximately 200 buildings, and really only 30 of them are any type of building automation system that allows us to optimize their mechanical systems, their HVAC, even be able to turn them off automatically on nights and weekends. And so we really want to make sure that we install control systems where it makes sense in our larger facilities to be able to further those automated efforts. But the way this is written as well, up to 15% of this total funding can go towards any type of energy project, regardless of what the return is. So that is where we're able to think really creatively, and anything that we want to pilot, or even if we just want to start with rooftop solar, it is not bound by some of the restrictions placed on the majority of this fund, because the majority of the fund is specifically dedicated to energy projects that are going to have a financial return of 6 years or less. So approximately $100,000 this first year can be available to start implementing rooftop solar projects. And there are a couple buildings that we are actively looking at this right now as potential place to start. There's been no decision just yet on which facilities we will choose for our first projects. But obviously any type of building that we're looking at putting on a new roof is something that it's important to evaluate if it might be a good candidate. So we are in the middle of that now. I will also mention, I know that it was brought up earlier that we did have our first year of the Solarized campaign. And while I've not led that up, I did want to say that that has been very successful so far. This was the very first year, but there were over 1,400 inquiries for individuals looking to get solar on their homes. And so far, that has led to 80 signed contracts. That number may have changed in the past week or two, I'm not sure. But for the very first year of a Solarized campaign, that's a pretty big success to have ultimately seen 80 signed contracts. And we do anticipate trying to make this an annual program and continuing to look for bulk pricing discounts and pre-vetted installers to make it easy and accessible for the community in future years. And as a part of those 80 contracts, I believe 5 of them were ultimately funded from a grant for low-income housing to provide the solar systems free of cost for those households. And the intent is to be able to continue providing that annually as well. let's see. And from there, I also wanted to make sure I mentioned that we do have a multi-year project for our street lighting as well. I believe this has been brought up before, but in the coming 5 years, we are going to be replacing all of our streetlights, which are owned and operated by LG&E now, but the vast majority of them are not not LED lighting. And that lighting represents a substantial portion of overall city energy usage. I believe it's approximately 20 to 25% of our energy usage is associated with the city street lighting. So by replacing those with LED, that will be a reduction of somewhere between 50 to 60%. It depends on which lighting fixture and the exact layout to be determined. But the first replacements are happening in the final quarter of this year, and we anticipate being able to see the reduction in the energy use associated with that by the start of next year. And that'll be something we continue to track and report out on because it'll be a pretty big impact on our overall energy consumption. And then there was also the mayor's executive order for electric vehicles that all new vehicle purchases are evaluated to see if we can do it as an electric vehicle instead of a traditional vehicle. So in facilities and fleet, as whenever vehicles are leaving service, we are trying to put them in order for electric vehicles, and we've just received 4 more in this past month. And we are expanding our charging infrastructure in as many locations as we can so that the infrastructure is ready for facilities and fleet vehicles as we continue to expand our electric fleet. So with that is the overview I have, but I'm happy to try to get more specific where I can with any questions.
There is a comment in the chat room that I think I might ask Paul Garcia to elaborate on a little bit. As you can see, there's talking about the customer choice is really kind of an essential part of a lot of what we're talking about, and some of it wouldn't even be possible without customer choice. Paul, is there a specific project you had in mind, or was it just the whole approach? Do you want to elaborate on that before Sam and Zachary might comment?
Sure. I think it's very interesting and I don't know the fellow's name from Cincinnati had to say. And I've seen those sorts of programs before, but in Kentucky, you're not going to be able to pull that off unless you have electric choice like they do in Ohio. And it's not necessarily a matter of how they're regulated. It is a legislative push that would have to be made to allow Kentucky to have consumer choice, which Ohio's had for, well, I don't know, some number of years, maybe several decades, where individuals could actually buy their own power. But in Kentucky, until we get the legislators to buy off on that, and I may be wrong, but I don't think just pressuring the Public Service Commission would allow that to happen. But what he's suggesting is very doable. It could be very interesting, but we got to get past the hurdle of being able to do that in the first place.
Can I just throw something in here real quick? Sorry, let me turn my video back on. I completely understand about the fact that customer choice isn't an option for y'all right there, but I think it goes back to that trying to be creative and thinking outside the box. Like, is there a way to not only bring Louisville Metro government, but also residents to LG&E and say, hey, we have all these folks. Is there a way to create a PPA for all this usage? And I don't know how that works from a tariff perspective with the state, but are there different ways that you can do that outside of having customer choice, right? So just continually encouraging everybody to think about, different ways to approach it, and not saying the regulatory structure limits us. It limits us a ton when it comes to energy efficiency in Ohio, right? We have zero, it's like anti-energy efficiency in Ohio, but we have to come up with creative ways to get around that. And I think the same applies to you all when it comes to solar because of that lack of community choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the real way to do this, or the typical traditional way to do this, would get to work with the Kentucky State Legislature and to get them to change the way utilities are regulated. That's just not going to happen anytime soon because of the difference in attitude, shall we say, between Frankfurt and Louisville. So I think we have to be creative. We have to think of ways of doing it. And I think there are some, and particularly the idea of not so much legislated consumer choice, but aggregating consumer demand to try to get LG&E to supply electricity through solar electricity through a power purchase agreement. And I'm not sure exactly how that can happen, but I know it can happen. As long as we keep having hurricanes up in Canada and the one that's going on right now, I mean, I can't think of any other more motivating way to get us to overcome the obstacles that people continually say, we can't do this, we can't do this. We can do it, and we have to find out a way to do it. And we need to start that here locally. Eventually, we'll have to get the Kentucky legislature to change. But we have to be motivated and organized in order to put pressure in the right places to help people make the right kinds of decisions. And that's essentially what we're doing tonight. Do we have any other questions, Paul? Or?
Yes, another one in the chat room from Wallace asking Zachary, can you talk about the recent EPAD success story and tell us what EPAD is?
Yeah, so the EPAD is a federal program, and EPAD is the name for the version that we have here in Kentucky of that federal program, and it stands for Energy Project Assessment District. And it essentially is a creative form of financing that would allow commercial buildings to make pretty substantial energy improvements without any upfront costs. So whereas a lot of times commercial buildings may be hesitant to embark on large energy projects because perhaps they don't have much credit available or because lenders are hesitant, what the EPAD program does is it essentially will finance energy projects on very long-term loans, which is important because when you are doing an energy project, if it's something that does have a return, but it's over a 15 or 20-year period, EPAD can make that really attractive because if you're paying the project off over a 30-year period, you're really seeing a net positive cash flow from day one from your energy project. The other thing that's unique about it is instead of it being a traditional credit line, what the EPAD does is it is a loan that's essentially affixed to the property instead of the owner. So if you finance an energy project through EPAD, that financing is paid back through that property's tax assessment, and it conveys with the property if that commercial building were to be sold and bought by another owner, instead of being following the owner. So there are a handful of, there's a lot of opportunity to use that in large buildings that may not have otherwise went through traditional financing means to pursue energy projects. And the latest press release, I can link it for it to be sent out in full afterwards as well. But essentially, there are two very large projects that were recently closed, representing $9 million in funding for energy efficiency projects. I don't want to go into the details of that too much because I'm not heavily involved in administering that, and I don't want to get any of it wrong. But it represents some pretty ambitious energy projects that it's really exciting we're able to get those financed locally.
Okay, I have one final question for Zachary, and this I'm gonna put you on the spot here. I'm sure you won't mind, but according to my calculations as a retired solar installer, to produce about 10 to 12 million kilowatt hours a year, which is about what the city uses, we would need about 400 or 500 acres of land, and we have the technology. We know how to do this. I've done it. Not that biggest project, but we've done projects like that. And not only that, this 400 or 500 acres is smaller than some of the power purchase agreements that LG&E is already engaged in. So the practicality is there. The obstacles are political and administrative and perhaps ideological. But let me ask you, my question is, if we were able to figure out a way to get a developer to build the city of Louisville a solar field of about 400 or 500 acres, utility scale, how would you see that operating? How would you see that possibility, or what ways would there might be to do that?
Well, I think that there are potential avenues for utility scale solar, just like you mentioned, in both of the options we're exploring. One big reason that we're looking at creating at least studying the local municipal utility is it would give us the ability to generate solar utility scale and distribute to our own facilities. The one small constraint we have right now with on-site solar is transmission. Essentially, the solar that we were to install, if we were to start pursuing that right now, all solar needs to be located on site of that account and used on site, or sold back to LG&E for the credit. But we can't necessarily, if we bought a lot of land, move that solar energy to the facilities located around the city without building our own transmission line. And that is a portion of what we're looking at through the study municipalization, is not only connecting to MISO so that we could purchase renewables wholesale at a very, very cheap rate, but also we would have the ability to create our own utility scale solar here and distribute it to our own facilities.
Right.
So that would be part of that evaluation. Through LG&E, if we are able to see a lot of progress and talks with them, that process could turn out to be fairly pain-free. They could choose to pursue a utility scale solar project where we, Louisville Metro government, are one of multiple clients and aggregate. In previous years, when they had not considered us a candidate for that, it was because with Dow and Toyota and other large customers, they were strictly looking at essentially meters or points of consumption that were very large time of day accounts, and they were not allowing customers to aggregate their own meters. Mm-hmm. So they were saying, we want to see 10 megawatts of consumption from a client to start discussing green tariff applications. And if you were to add all of our consumption up, we would be pretty close to that. However, they were not really entertaining possibilities of us aggregating our own accounts because it didn't really serve a clean account structure that they wanted to start with. I suppose it's likely because it was a relatively new offering to them, new program. But in later conversations, especially with NREL facilitating it did appear that there was some openness to go back to the drawing board on this. Mm-hmm. There may very well be parts of the process that might need Public Service Commission approval. I know that the Dow and Toyota deal ultimately did require Public Service Commission approval, and it didn't get it the first time, but they made some changes in it and they got it the second time around.
Sam, I'm going to jump in with the fact that my finger's on the button and take advantage of that. We're getting some good questions and comments. I'm going to read a comment and then a question and ask for a quick answer. Julie Donna points out that Kentucky has lots of creative solutions, policy and otherwise we can do. But Sam said all of them require us to be organized and vocally pushing for these changes. And then again, here's the, if we can get a quick answer, if that's possible. Graham Donovan is asking, is Metro essentially changing gasoline-powered vehicles to coal-powered vehicles as long as the electricity powering the charging stations is coming from LG&E's coal-fired generating plants?
Right.
So while I don't have the numbers right in front of me now, I will say that that has been a common question, and the short answer is the emissions impact is still greatly reduced by moving to electric vehicles. While coal is, not the cleanest source we'd like to see from the grid, the overall conversion, the energy losses associated with having a gas burning motor on site in your car versus the more efficient utility scale production still lends itself to reduced emissions when moving to an electric vehicle. The other thing about electrifying equipment is if we move away from natural gas, it means that when we do procure or supply renewable electric energy, that which is pulling from the grid, those end uses will continue to get cleaner as our grid gets cleaner. And that's something that can't happen if we're still using gas burning equipment. It will not continue to get cleaner as the grid or our supply improves.
Okay. Thank you, Zach. I really appreciate it. And Rob McCracken, I appreciate your help tonight. And we've run out of time. So Elisa, would you like to take us on out?
Yes, I would. I do want to note before we go that we did record tonight's forum, and so that will be available like past Real Good News recordings, including the mayoral forum. Voting is coming up, and we did have the mayoral candidates from both parties at a forum, and you can view what they said about the city's renewable energy resolution on the Kipple website. Paul, can you post a link to that so that people can find it once we get the recording and upload it?
That is up in the chat room right now.
Okay, all right. So if you have friends that you think would benefit from looking at this forum, then please send them the link and ask them to log on and to follow Real Good News, because in conjunction with Kipple and the St. Paul United Methodist Church Christian Action Group, we're going to keep at this. We're not going to stop trying to be creative and push for the changes we need to get to our goals. And I think we'll let John Gage have the last word in song. But again, we appreciate everyone coming, listening, learning with us, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Real Good News. Take it away, John.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Everything good? Okay, good. This is an old Malvina Reynolds song. I love Malvina Reynolds because she spoke very simply of profound things. In this point in time when this song became popular, we were worried about the rain. We were talking about radioactive rain and so forth. So she wrote this song, but I think it still fits what we're talking about tonight. Just a little rain falling all around. The grass lifts its head to the heavenly sound. Just a little rain, just a little rain. What have we done to the rain? Just a little boy standing in the rain, the gentle rain that falls for years. And the grass is gone, the boy disappears, and rain keeps falling like helpless tears. What have we done to the rain? Just a little breeze out of the sky. The leaves nod their heads as the breeze blows by. Just a little breeze with some smoke in its eye. What have we done to the rain? Just a little rain falling all around. The grass lifts its head to the heavenly sound. Just a little rain, just a little rain. What have we done to the rain? Thank you. You all are wonderful.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.